Okay, what I want to talk about, I think later on in the break, we're going to talk about the midterm quiz, question 18, question 29. There's a few corrections I need to make. And also there's one more case study presentation, which is on PQI. And it's a similar theme to HTC, but I think it's important for the class that you understand some of the sourcing frameworks so you can make sense of these stories that you're hearing about from HTC and PQI. PQI, Joanne, who is PQI? Who is PQI?
Memory device manufacturer.
Okay. And what does PQI stand for?
Power something. I cannot pronounce. I'm sorry.
I thought it was Performance Quotient
International.
Yeah, correct. Power Quotient International. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, Taiwanese company. You'll be presenting on that later on tonight. And so I want everyone to have energy for that, and so we can spend a little bit more time understanding how these big buyers manage their suppliers. But for now, let's get on to part one. So you're probably wondering, where's part two? Part two is next week. But for part one, we're looking at how MMCs manage their supply chains. And so what do we mean by MMC? Well, we're actually talking about large customers. We're talking about customers like HTC. And I think it's not a special case. It's actually a majority of the case. A lot of the supply chains around the world are managed by multinationals, the Fortune 500. So is there some way that we can understand? Remember when we looked at the buyer supplier, we looked at a small buyer or the SME, what framework did we use to understand how a small buyer approaches sourcing? What framework did we use? What framework? Come on.
Three-circle framework.
Three-circle control framework. Exactly. You know that. All right. So I think, and that was really for small buyers, because small buyers, they cannot do everything in the three-circle control framework. They have to hire lawyers. They have to hire sourcing people to find the right suppliers if they can't find them themselves. They have to hire auditors. They have to hire. They don't have the resources, all right? And the first 7 weeks, we spent a lot of time thinking about, in each of those circles, problems can occur. So just because you hire an auditor doesn't mean that all your problems are solved by hiring an auditor. You still need to give proper specifications to the auditor. You still need to know what you are sourcing. Okay, now we go into week 9, 10, and 11, and now we're multinational. Does a multinational really, do they have the resources? Do they cover the three-circle control framework? Basically, they have the resources to do all three things in the three-circle control framework. They don't need to hire anyone. The multinational that has a real genuine supply chain, they will have a procurement team, and the procurement team will do the sourcing, like in HTC. The procurement team will do the monitoring of suppliers. The procurement team and their legal team will look after the contracting of the suppliers. You see, they don't need to go outside and outsource middlemen to do all this work. Okay. So once we go, so the question becomes is, okay, they've got the three-circle control framework taken care of, then, so it's easy, right? Yes and no. And what I'm going to show you is I want to show you some frameworks now to get you to think differently. I need you to think differently about the challenges that big buyers might have. Okay. And these sourcing frameworks will help you to think differently. Then after the break, we're going to talk about MMC best practices. so another chapter from the KPMG report I wrote, where I actually talk about, well, what is IKEA doing? What is Esala? What is Giorgio Armani? What is H&M? What is Puma? What are they doing? What are these MMCs actually doing when they're managing their suppliers? All right. And then finally, later on, how do large buyers manage their suppliers? Performance measurement and monitoring is one area. And that's where I'll get the group to present on PQI, because it's an excellent case on how big buyers measure and monitor their suppliers. And then there's cost management strategies. So that's the plan for tonight. So let's have a look at MMC sourcing frameworks. Now, do you remember this picture that I did from many weeks ago? Put your hand up if you've seen this before. Yes or no? Come on, some of you are so slow tonight. Come on. So it's only 8:30. You're putting your hand up so slow like this, as if you're half asleep. Come on, just, all right. All right, we need to wake up here. All right, you all saw that before. Remember, the big thing that the big buyer has that small buyer doesn't have is this big magnifying glass. They can watch over the supplier like clockwork. All right, this was some of the notes I made from last year, but if you watched my video from last year, you would have seen how I put that together. So what we're going to do, we're going to have there's, I think, 3 or 4 stages of a Kahoot game that will help take you through what I want to cover tonight. But the first part is looking at some frameworks. And so first of all, here's the big question I have for you. What do major buyers care about? So can I ask you to write something in here in answer to the first question? Is there one word that can capture what large global buyers care about? And if you can write in the chat room now, please. Out of these 5. Yeah, cost, reputation, cost, reputation. I think you're paying too much attention to the HTC case study. They did pay attention a lot to cost, I agree. And I think the group could have emphasized even more that it is a dog-eat-dog world in what HTC is competing in, and they're asking their suppliers to cost down up to 5% every 3 months. Is that right? Is that right, Zulkifli? Is that right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you noticed that, right? Okay, so everyone either said cost or reputation. Well, I think the real answer ultimately for the big buyer is reputation. That's a huge difference. Small buyers don't have a reputation to lose. Okay, small buyers, they can go bankrupt tomorrow and then set up a new company and do the same thing again. But the large buyers, reputation, it just takes decades to develop. So it's something they don't want to lose overnight. Okay, reputation. So reputation can be destroyed very, very easily, and I'll show you in a minute. Just want to remind you that I talked about VF Corp in the first week. Is that right? Remember, I talking to the global supply chain manager of VF Corp. I asked him, what is your number 1 challenge? He said, what was that? Out of these 5 items, what was their biggest challenge? Is it a combination of any of these? Do you remember that from week 1? Yes or no? Week 1 wasn't long ago. Come on. It's combining 2 of these 5 items. Which 2 of these 5 items do we combine? There's a puzzle for you. The first item is cost, and what was the second item? Menglu, do you know?
Time.
Time, yes. The cost. Nada, what was it? What did VF Corp?
Cost and time.
Yeah, not cost and time. It's actually the cost of time. Okay. So in some ways it was time. Remember, they put their small pocket 5-pocket variety gene in Mexico factory, but the more higher end designs they sourced from China. Okay, because they knew the skilled labor they have in China was much more important than the days it took to get items shipped over to the USA market. Okay, but the biggest thing they're scratching their heads with all the time is about trying to trade off this time to market and sourcing from a low cost country, but also trying to source from the right skilled country to meet a particular market that they are selling to. Wow. And when I talked to HTC, what was their biggest challenge? Group 6, what was it? Come on. One of these 5 things. What was it?
Forecasting.
Getting the forecast correct. Exactly. If we can get the forecast correct, the global supply chain manager told me we can run the supplier like clockwork. Yes. All right. You know, tick, 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 tick. Right. Clockwork. Huh? All right. So, and finally, Puma, their biggest challenge. What do you think their biggest challenge is? One of those 5. Which one do you think? Have a guess. Come on.
Reputation.
Reputation. Absolutely. Reputation. It's a global brand. And I'm going to show you a picture in a minute where there's an actual article where the Puma t-shirts were ripped off the soccer players' backs and they traced it back to a particular batch in a factory. Okay, so is there some way that we can start to understand? Like what I did, hopefully what I've done in the last 5 minutes is confuse you, because we talk about different company, but they have different things they care about. Yeah, but O'Connor, you're supposed to be teaching us and giving you clarity. A good teacher gives you clarity. A good teacher doesn't confuse you. Am I right? But I want to confuse you first, and then I'm going to bring clarity second. See, this is what happened with Puma. This is back in 2016. They ripped Swiss t-shirt due to a batch of defective material. And my friend, who's the global supply chain manager of Puma at that time, I think the next morning when she woke up, because she's based in Hong Kong, and this happened the night before in the soccer match, she had about 30 emails from senior personnel in Puma just asking, number 1, what's going on? Number 2, fix it. Okay. Number 1, what happened? Number 2, fix it. Okay. That's the job of the supply chain manager. Okay. All right. And so they found that it was associated with the yarns that were used in production with a particular batch. Okay. All right. So if we go to project management, how many of you have studied project management? Anyone? Quick. Okay, well, supplier management's like project management, because if you look at project management, even if you don't study supply chain management, if you study operations management, then the major trade-offs are scope, time, cost, and quality. And the challenge is, or if you go to McKinsey, you go to Boston Consulting Group, they said, you can have 2 of these, you can't have all 4. Or keeping quality equal, I can give you scope and cost, but it's going to take you more time. Keeping quality equal, I can give you lower cost and a shorter time, but you have to order a larger volume. You with me? You cannot have a small volume. Or keeping quality constant. If you're willing to give up time, then if you have a high volume for a low cost, that you can achieve that. So these are major trade-offs in basically project management. So I just want to show you that When we see stuff like this or trade-offs in supply chain management, I don't want you to think, oh, this is just supply chain management only. No, these trade-offs between cost and scope and time and quality, these are challenges in just basic project management anyway, whether you're managing suppliers or not. It's always a challenge. And the problem is that, and the good thing, like HTC and Apple and these big companies, they have so much power, they're able to find a way, and we're going to learn this secret tonight. Listen up for the next 5 seconds, please. They're able to find a way to have all 4 items, to have their cake and eat it. Let me repeat. Let me repeat. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Let me repeat. The one big thing you're going to learn tonight is how can these big multinationals get all 4 of these things managed? Like, I just want you to think that if I can have the scope I want, if I can have the low cost I want, if I can have the quick lead time I want and the quality I want, don't you agree that if I can check scope, check quality, check cost, check time, check, don't you think that's perfect management? Don't you think that's a perfect project that I'm managing, a perfect supply chain I'm managing? What do you agree or not? I just want you to think this is what we want to, this is the perfection. This is the utopia. This is the ideal we want. And so if that's the ideal, okay, I want you to think, okay, how, and the group that presented first, like I chided you because you went over time and everything like that, but I'm glad you presented first for this reason, that it looked like HTC were doing things that, well, hang on, they're getting everything they want and they're not even giving any consideration to their suppliers. Am I right? Hello? Group G6, when you presented, is that what you thought?
Yep.
Like they're breaking all the rules. It's sort of like they're getting 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the big thing I want you to take away tonight, this is the big thing I want you to take away tonight, that is, how do they do that? Like, how can the big buyers do that? It's not just power. There's something else that they do. All right. And that's what we're going to learn tonight. All right. So okay. It's not easy to get that 1, 2, 3, 4. Next week, when I talk to you about how Apple does it, and you'll go, wow, they really do that? Yes, they do. Unbelievable. Can't wait to next week. Okay, let's go back. Let's take one step back. Stay with me. Stay with me here. Let's take one step back. All right. And we're looking at a large buyer. This is a single supplier management model. Okay. This is not multiple. Okay. Single. Okay. All right. HTC, for the most part, for every component, they got multiple suppliers. Is that right? G6. Okay. PQI, for the most part, they have multiple suppliers. But before we get to there, this is what a single supplier problems we're looking about. For a single supplier management model, there are 3 things we don't know. Number one, well, we don't know the buyer demand forecast. Remember HTC, their biggest challenge, getting the forecast right. All right. Number 2, they don't always know the supplier capacity. Why? Because suppliers will just tell you anything they want to get their order. You know, HTC will say to supplier, can you do $1 million a month over the next 6 months? Suppliers say, yes, no problem. But the supplier may go, and because HTC is a big customer, the supplier may go and say no to other customers they have promised. without telling them. The other customers find out later, and then the supplier says, "Oh, I'm very, very sorry. We'll pay the penalty, blah, blah, blah." And, suppliers will do things like that. They will not say no to a big customer. So you don't want suppliers doing that. Why? Because in the end, the suppliers will not be sustainable. If they keep lying to some customers to try and do the right thing by other customers, you don't want that. So you want suppliers to be honest with you about their capacity. You want suppliers to be honest about their cost structure. And that doesn't always happen. Wow. When HTC says to suppliers every 3 months, we want you 5% cost down because our customers are putting pressure on us. What's the supplier to do? They either do 5% down. They say, well, we've got to help us out here. You give us more volume so then we can purchase larger volumes of materials, and then we're able to give you a lower cost down. You see the negotiation that could go on here. But suppliers may at the same time, they may say, well, sorry, we can't do 5% cost down because we're already running at 95% yield, and we've got automation, we've got this and that. Our cost structure are very, very high. You've got to help us out here, HTC, So how does HTC believe the supplier that says that their costs are already as low as they can be? You with me?
I have a question, may I?
Yes, Jason.
Yeah, so if these big buyers have the rights or the bargaining power to know the supplier's cost structure, doesn't that also mean they will know how much the supplier is earning, their margins?
Wait a minute. First of all, this is a single supply management model, okay? And they may not, at the starting point, you don't have another supplier to compare with, right? So there's a challenge there, right? And so suppliers are free to actually go and tell you what they think their costs are. And if they're not publicly listed, then they may inflate some costs. So I want you to think about, how could suppliers inflate their costs? How many of you have studied accounting? Jason, that's a good question, by the way. How many of you have studied accounting?
I did.
Jason, you studied? Haley, anyone else?
I did as well.
Joey, congratulations on the Kahoot. Joey, you're paying attention. Well done. Okay. All right. Someone else did. Dan George, good. All right. So when you study accounting and you do a cost of goods sold statement, you have 3 types of costs. What are they? Labor. What else? Material. What else? Overhead, right? Okay. So I want you to think about, out of labor, material, and overhead, where do you think suppliers can lie to you? Do you think they can lie on labor costs? Maybe, maybe not.
Overhead.
Possibly overhead. And so what goes part of the overhead? Machinery, tooling, other things, right? So a supplier can say, oh, this tooling is going to cost us $60,000 when in fact it only costs 50,000. How does the buyer know the difference? Okay, what about labor? Can I lie about the labor? My factory workers, I have to pay them $8 an hour, whereas the average wage rate in my country is only $6 an hour.
But in our HTC presentation, they mentioned that they audit their financial positions and stuff.
Okay.
So
well, they can.
Wouldn't that be traceable?
Yeah, that's traceable. They have to have the power to audit. Absolutely, yes. But they can inflate their overhead costs. They may not give a breakdown of the overhead in their financial position. You with me? They can make the tooling costs higher and then make other costs that are not associated with a particular supply to that customer lower. So the customer still thinks, oh, the tooling associated with my particular order is 20% inflated, but I don't know. So even if you audit the financial statements, the supplier can still change some numbers. Dan, George, right?
Yeah, no, I was going to pretty much say the same thing.
If you know, those study accounting, you can, overhead allocations are very subjective. Okay, very subjective. So there's some machinery that's used for all customers, but there's tooling used for specific customers. And maybe the financial statements, unless it's that granular detail, the supplier may not share those details with you. Or if they do, they may just say, oh, the tooling is more than what the overhead, what it really is.
But this issue only arises when you have a single supplier, right?
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm really saying that single supplier model, okay? All right. All right. And then finally, you've got demand forecast. So you've got capacity. These are 3 areas of unknowns. So I call this the 3 big unknowns. Okay. And those that study accounting or operations, you're going to have a efficient order quality quantity model. How many of you have heard of that before? Okay, so ideally you're trading off purchase order costs from carrying costs. That means if we want to, every time we order something, then there's a transaction cost, right? If we want to reduce transaction costs of the purchase order, then why don't we just order once every 3 months rather than once a month? But then when we order once every 3 months, then we've got 3 months of inventory sitting around. So therefore the carrying costs go up. So you're always trading off one against the other. But then if we have a look at the JIT model, which was made famous by the Japanese out of the 80s, 90s, out of the 1980s, it's all about let's not have any inventory at all. And it's all about coordinating everything perfectly so that every time we need a part, then we only have 2 or 3 days of parts in inventory and not 3 months of parts in inventory. But the problem is that maybe we have to run a big order because we have sales that are 20, 30% more than expected for a new product. And then we get stock out costs. So you got trade-offs here between ordering and inventory. You got trade-offs here between inventory, keeping low inventory and having stock out costs, not being able to make sales. These are all challenges in the operations, and they feed into the demand forecast. You know, if you get the forecast wrong, then it causes problems here. If you get the forecast wrong, then that's a huge challenge everywhere in your own operations and in the supply chain. But then on top of that, you've got suppliers that can lie to you because of their capacity, and they can lie to you about their cost structure. They're never ever going to tell you their cost structure is lower than what it really is. If anything, they'll make it higher than what it really is. Wow. Okay, so this slide is a very, in some ways, it's very much an accounting information problem. Okay, now let's go to the next stage. All right, what about the multi-supplier management model? So how do we overcome some of these problems? Well, let's order from 2 or more suppliers, because then we don't have to worry so much about capacity, because we've got 2 or more. If one supplier cannot meet everything I want, I go to the second supplier or third supplier. Are you with me here? All right. So each supplier can actually meet 100% of your order. But what you do is you pick 3 suppliers, multi-sourcing, and then you say, oh, I'll have 30% from you, 30% from you, and 40% from you. And you know you're safe with respect to this circle here. Am I right? Okay. Then what about this circle here? Suppliers can still lie to you. Yes, they can, but now all three suppliers have to tell the same lie. And that's very hard for them to do if they don't know each other. Are you with me here? If one supplier says, the tooling is 50,000, but it really is 40,000, and the other two suppliers have to say the same thing for you to believe that supplier. You with me here? So once you go into multi-sourcing, then you actually solve this problem, and you solve this problem here. Class, let's just step back a bit. Number one, right? Remember, the buyer, the big thing that challenge a buyer has is their reputation. But with that, because they're large, they're actually ordering large volumes from suppliers. They're not a small buyer that just orders small volumes. You're ordering large. So that's why a lot of these large buyers, they always multi-source. Now you're multi-source because of the supplier capacity, large volumes. But with that, you get the benefit that the supplier will share the correct information with you. Or you do what Jason or Dan said. When you audit one supplier, you can compare their financial statements with another supplier directly, and then you know if one is lying or not. Wow. Do they lie? Of course they do, all the time. All right. Unbelievable. Some of the things suppliers will tell you. Okay. And then, but then there's still the challenge of the buyer demand forecast, but it's not as great a challenge. Why? Because you are now, if you get the forecast wrong, you are spreading that error across three suppliers and not one supplier. Are you with me here? So that error for each supplier is only 1/3 as bad as if it was just a single supplier you're sourcing from. So what I'm telling you is that often large buyers, they move from single sourcing to multi-sourcing in order to deal with these three big unknowns. So let's go to the multi-sourcing model. So we're multi-sourcing because we're dealing with these three big unknowns: capacity, forecast, and structure. And then by multi-sourcing, now we create market forces. Why? Because one supplier is competing with the other. You ask one supplier, Mr. Supplier, can you put your cost down 5%? Oh, yes, sir, no problem. Okay, go to the second supplier. Can you put your cost down, can you give me a 5% cheaper price? The supplier says, oh, no, I can't do that. We're already at the bone. I said, well, sorry, but supplier B just told me they put their costs down by another 5%. So I know you can do this, Mr. Supplier. You're not telling me the right thing. Does that happen? All the time. And this is what we mean by benchmarking. Once you start comparing suppliers, then that gives the multinational even more power. And this is why HTC has power, because it's multi-sourcing. If it was just single sourcing, it wouldn't have as much power. Wow. So you've got these market forces and the three big unknowns that multi-sourcing is taking care of. Okay. But let's go to the two other areas that now present problems when working with a lot of suppliers. Well, suppliers want to get paid, have good negotiation outcomes and reorders. So, but the problem is that you can never have a perfect contract with suppliers because the large buyers, they don't know everything. There's always something. Okay. By comparing suppliers, you can get more information, but you cannot get perfect information. Okay. You cannot, like HTC, they have agreements with their suppliers that if they change a part, every time they change a part in their assembly or the component that they supply in the HTC, they have to report it to HTC. What they're telling me is that Some suppliers, what they do is they may wait until they have 5 changes, and then they put them all under one report to make it look as though it's only one change. Do they do that? Yes, they do. Even though they on contract, they should have made 5 reports. So the suppliers, they still do little things like this. And so contracts are not always complete. In other words, I'm the big buyer. I have a lot of power. I can do lots of things, but I don't have almighty power. I cannot control everything perfectly. Okay, I control 90%, but there's still 10% I can't control. And then, all right. And if I am really as bad as Group 6 told us in the first presentation about HTC, if I'm that bad, like they're really, Group 6, HTC was really bad, weren't they? Am I right, Sharon?
Yeah.
You came across like that. Wow. So if I'm a supplier, do you think I'd really be interested in staying with HTC in the long term? If you're always under the thumb of the customer, they're always pushing you, cost down, cost down, cost down. Do you think I'm going to stay around? Do you think there'll be a day come along and say, oh, I've had enough, sorry, we can't do any more. And even before that, let's start looking for other customers. You know, because HTC has now pushed me to the stage where I can no longer make a profit. But that's all right. I'll still get the benefit of being a supplier to HTC. What would I do? I will shop around for more customers saying, oh, I'm an approved supplier with HTC. You can trust me. Here are my credentials. Here's my track record with HTC. And once they get enough customers elsewhere, guess what they're going to do? When HTC knocks on the door, hey, we need another 5% cost down. What's the supplier going to do? Martha, what's the supplier going to do? Hello? Come on. Quick.
Allocate the capacity to customers that they can make more profit from.
Yeah, they'll just say no to HTC. Oh, sorry, HTC, we really can't help you this time. You know, but HTC doesn't know when it will get to that stage, right? Supplier's not going to tell HTC, oh, HTC, look, you know, I'm going to stay with you for the next 9 months, but during this time, I'm looking for more customers. They're not going to tell HTC that. All right. The one power that suppliers have that no multinational can take away from a supplier is the power to say no. And the power to say, oh, we're no longer going to supply. Okay. All right. So, so what do multinationals have to do? What's the missing piece? Let me repeat here. All right. Right. We go from single supplier. We've got these problems. We solve those problems. We go to multi-supplier. We multi-source. We solve the big unknowns by multi-sourcing. But everything's not perfect because suppliers are going to be doing deals behind your back when they get to a stage where you start to press them too hard. So therefore you need to do something else. You need to work on supplier development, and that's the secret sauce. And that's where, and PQI presentation later today, we'll talk about this, about formal teams and performance measurement. Procurement teams and performance measurement. HCC do that. They do that to help manage the suppliers' ongoing development. So they don't just say to the suppliers, oh, we need you to cost down by 5%. They will actually send teams to the suppliers to help the supplier to improve their cost management. Wow. Okay. Do they do that? Yeah, most of them do that. Yes, a lot of them do that. And that's the only way that you can stop suppliers from leaving you. And that the big multinationals, the successful ones that are concerned about sustainable supply chain management, they always focus a lot on this area here, supplier development. But in order to develop suppliers, you still need to measure their performance. You need to find out. Just HTC had a number of suppliers from 500 to 700 suppliers. Let me repeat, 500 to 700 suppliers. Okay, Apple has over 500 suppliers. 500. Okay, so do you think the development team can go to 500, Nicole? No? Ashley, do you think Apple can go to 500 suppliers and develop every one of them? Yes? No? Huh? Nada, what do you think?
I think Apple is a big company, but 500 is also a lot. So I'm confused.
Well, it's impossible. I'm just saying it's impossible to go to every supplier and develop. So what they do is they have formal teams performance measurement, just like HTC do. And with that performance measurement, they can track the performance of suppliers. And what HTC does, PQI does, is then they grade the suppliers, A, B, C, D. Do they do that? Yes, they do. Hundreds of them. And all they have to do is say, development team, I want you to go and visit these suppliers. They've just gone from B down to a C grade. I want you to visit them and find out what's going on with them and to make sure they don't go to a D grade. Because if they go to D grade, they might be just cut off their whole list. And the idea is they'll go to the C grade suppliers to help bring them up to a B grade again. You with me here? So this is, the measurement system is a way of filtering and grading. Let me repeat, the measurement system is a way of filtering and grading to support supplier development. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show you, the first part tonight. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a quick Kahoot session that goes over some of these frameworks, and then we're going to have a break. Okay. What do you think?
Okay.
All right.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see if this Kahoot works. And now we got MC play. Choose a way. Which one are we doing? We're doing this one.
Neil, I have another question. May I?
Yeah, just are we all randomized order of answers, randomized order of questions? No, that's fine. Minimize intro, two-step join. Okay, everything. Let's just go recommended. Team player versus team. No. How do we just say go?
Just choose classic.
What do I click to go?
Classic.
The green color button.
The green color.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me just turn the volume down a little bit. Now remember this, we've breaking it up here, then we're going to have a break. This is questions 1 to 4, okay? 1 to 4 only. There's 15 to recover tonight, okay? So you're all ready to go? 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. 6, 4, 1, 2, 2, 8, 2. You got that? Are you in there?
In your right side, there is a button for volume. You can turn it off.
Okay. Are you ready to start? Everyone ready to go?
The top corner, Dr. The top corner.
On the top right, sir.
Top right, sir.
You want me to start here? Ready?
Sure.
Ginny, is everything ready to go?
There is a button in the top right for volume. You can turn it off, I think so. Top right. Yeah.
Wait a minute, just a minute. Let me just turn this.
Yeah.
Are we ready to start? Okay, let's
Yes.
go. It's only 4 questions, then we have a break. Okay. You have 30 seconds for these questions too. Okay, well done. Reputation risk, you know that one. Very, very clear. Remember, we're going from week 7 to week 9 here. Next one. Okay, Olivia, well done. Very fast. Joey, already warmed up from that last game. Agyar, you're coming up there. That's great. Okay, next one. Number 2. Let's go. Which of the following is the big unknown in the single supplier management model? Okay, all right. The answer, supply cost structure. It's a big unknown. Remember, we had a big conversation about the accounting, huh? All right. Supply forecast. No, there was a buyer forecast. Okay, good, good, good. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so that's 2. We've done 2. Dan, you're on top. Well done. The accountant's winning here. Okay, good answer on that one. Very fast. What are the factors that influence multi-supplier management model? Multi-supplier this time. Okay, it was all of the above. Some of you said performance measurement, but remember, market, once you start to have multi-supplier, you've got market forces, right? Because one supplier is competing against another one. Information asymmetry, that's another factor because you can compare one supplier versus another to know if one supplier is lying or not. Okay. And of course, performance measurement is a big area too. Very, very important to aid in a filtering device to work out which suppliers you need to help, which ones, in especially supplier development. Okay, the last of the questions, then we'll have a break. Thank you. Yishang, well done. Han and Dan, Alifia and Zhao, very well done. Great efforts here. Okay, next quiz. That's the last of the 4. What are the 3 circles of management in the multi-supplier management model? Okay, the answer is supply development. Remember, multi-sourcing, incomplete contracts. Okay. Some of you said information asymmetry, demand forecast, supply capacity. Yes, they're part of it, but they're more factors that impact on it rather than the three circles itself. Okay, so just a short, quick quiz just to help you digest what we just covered in the last 45 minutes. That is, large buyers, in some ways, they have the power of everything to do everything with suppliers. But the one thing they don't have is they cannot stop a supplier from saying no. Let me repeat, they cannot stop a supplier from saying no. And that's why in the multi-supplier model, we multi-source to manage the information and benchmark against suppliers, create markets. And also at the same time, we need to devote resources to developing suppliers so they don't just say no unexpectedly when we need capacity from them. There you go. Let's have a break. I'll see you back in about 7 minutes, which will be 8:40. And thank you for hanging on for this last minute. And we'll come back with your question at the end. That person asked a question before. See you at 8:40. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We just had a break. And before the break, I think someone want to ask a question. So can I just have that question, please? Anyone? Any questions? Zulkifli, questions? Yi Chang Yang, any questions? Jason? Dan?
Nope, no questions from me.
Okay, let's get back into it because remember, what is the big theme? So, you know, what's so special about the big, powerful buyers? And if they're so powerful, can they get away with like murder? You know, can they get away with anything, right? Not exactly. Next week, yes, you'll probably find that, yeah, Apple does get away with a lot. I'm going to tell you a lot of stories about that. But for the most part, the average MMC needs to invest a lot in supplier development. That's this section here. I'm going to give you some more insights from multinationals in other industries. So let's just get into that, shall we? Okay, remember, more sustainable supply chain. And what I mean by sustainable, what I mean is long term, okay? Sustainability is all about long term, okay? Long-term survival. All right, so there's a lot of best practice out there, and I'm going to give you some exact examples shortly, but for now, there is things you can read about how New Balance is trying to reduce lead time. I've told you about what VF Corp does, one of the largest manufacturer of jeans in the world. And a new thing I saw was Red Wing. And basically they're kind of like a fully vertically integrated company, but basically they have a lot of outsourcing within their whole hierarchical structure. In other words, they have kind of a partial ownership of the whole process of making shoes. And this company is based in China, and like that's just a different type of business model that most multinationals have never seen before in this process. Let's get to what I have witnessed myself from my own interviews. This is my direct interviews with sourcing managers of S. Oliver, H&M, Puma, and IKEA. And what I learned from them, and it's not about remembering all of these ideas, but I just want to point out some similarities. And one thing that up until COVID that a lot of these companies were doing were they were starting to realize that communicating with suppliers from afar through email was not sufficient. We have to send our design teams to the factory to actually speed up the design process. And actually you get that perfect sample, and then you can start production on the same day. You get that perfect sample and it's approved because the design teams are in the factory. And that's what S. Oliver does, Giorgio Armani, and a lot of other companies. They'll send their design teams directly to the factory in China, in Bangladesh, in India, in Vietnam, to speed up the design to production process. And that's a big thing that a lot of these companies have started doing in the last 5 years. And that really wasn't evident more than 5 years ago. Another big thing that these companies were doing were they were starting to consolidate their supplier base. In other words, cut down the number of suppliers that they have from literally hundreds to less than 100 in a lot of cases. And another, H&M, they have something like, and IKEA have a similar program. Remember if you were flying with maybe Cathay Pacific or Malaysian Airlines or Qantas or some Emirates or some company, they'll always offer for you to join a loyalty program. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So what they're doing now, what the good companies are doing, this is as part of it's part of this area, supplier development. Okay. What are they doing specially? Remember, any multinational can do multi-sourcing and, try to have as best contracts as possible and penalize them if suppliers do the wrong thing. But the secret sauce is in this area here, supplier development. Okay. How do we develop a relationship with the suppliers? Okay. We need to use some formal teams performance measurement, but what exactly are they doing? Well, what they're doing is they have virtual design teams, but they have this loyalty program where if a supplier is doing very, very well, when they become approved supplier, they say, look, you work with us for 6 months or 12 months. And if you do everything in orders as we are, we'll move you to a silver supplier level. And at the silver supplier level, we will share more with you about our future strategy. And then if you do very well for the next 6 months or 12 months, we'll move you to gold. And once you go to gold supplier, guess what? We will start to share with you longer term strategies, and we will start to work with you in more detail about how you can develop new products for us or new solutions for us that you never thought possible. And then if you keep doing this, we'll move you to a platinum level where you're basically becoming our partner. Wow, do they do that? Yes, that's what they do. So I just want you to think, all of you, if you're starting to, you got your first contract with H&M or IKEA, a lot of these are doing this, and you realize they had this loyalty program, don't you think that would be a positive thing or a negative thing? What do you think? Thumbs up for negative, hands up for positive. Hands up for positive.
Is there a way to say both?
Yeah, you can put both up, one in positive and negative. But I'm just saying it. Okay, so this is not an exact contract, but this is a promise by H&M, a promise by IKEA to the supplier. Look, you stay with us, and the better you do with us, we're not only going to give you more orders, but we're also going to share with you more information about the future, which can help you, Mr. and Mrs. Supplier, to actually develop your own offerings in the future. Wow. And if you keep doing that, you're going to become one of our gold and platinum partners. And then suddenly it's a partnership. It's not just a buyer-supplier relationship. Wow. Okay. So it's kind of like a loyalty program for your miles. So this is what they're doing. Virtual design teams. You've got these platinum relationships, a lot of collaboration going on. What is Puma doing? Well, I told you the bad thing about Puma with the t-shirts ripping literally on the soccer pitch 2016, and it was due to a problem in the factory. Well, I listened to a speech by the global director of supply chain, Anne-Laure Decourt, and she talked about three things: co-management, co-training, and co-creation. And so I call this the megatrends of the sustainability supply management tree of Puma. I actually wrote a small article on this. And now under co-management, you're actually working with on-site collaboration with the suppliers. If you're giving them more product roadmap visibility, if they're in a loyalty program, just like I said, with H&M and IKEA. On the co-training, you're actually helping the supplier by giving them more training. This is co-management is more information sharing. You with me? Co-training is more repositioning and actually helping the supplier to become a better supplier in the future. And then co-creation. So then we're more focusing more on this environment, sustainability, and it's all about focusing on sustainability is more about focusing on efficiency, transparency, and visibility, but the environment was all more about flexibility and knowing the customer. Knowing the customer was critical for the environment, okay? Because knowing the customer and product image is really, really key, because customers these days are driving a lot of the environmental awareness in apparel and footwear industry, okay? And so already, you know, we're halfway into tonight's session. Don't you feel a difference in how we're actually looking at the supply chain? Do you feel a difference?
Yes.
Big difference.
It's more similar to, yeah.
More similar to what?
More similar to human management. I mean, like we're supposed to more similar to human resource management.
Could be, yeah, possibly, yeah. In some ways, when we're talking about training, we're talking about information sharing, you know, and it's, you know, the big difference is this thing here. You've got to, you have lots of power, but you have to use that power sparingly, and you have to do a lot of supplier development. So what I'm showing you here is, well, how's that development taken place? Well, virtual design teams, platinum, gold, silver, loyalty programs. You got lots of collaboration going on. You got lots of information sharing here with co-management, lots of training, and also there are, increasingly awareness of the environment, because that's being driven a lot by the consumer and other NGOs. Wow. All right. And then, IKEA, a little bit more detail, but exactly what I'm saying. They're really focusing on like, as you said, Adgar, it's very big on thinking that your supplier is just one of your own. And so you've got to look after the suppliers like you look after your own human resource management. Wow, as if it's your own company. And so this is my summary in the KPMG report of those 4 companies. And there's several others I interviewed that I didn't mention here. But the big thing they worry about is the compliance risk. And so they're working proactively with NGOs. Collaborative planning, that's where, they're focusing a lot on supplier measurement and grading. So then we know which suppliers to spend more on development. There's committing on volume orders, visibility on future product roadmap. And like this year alone, they're literally, we're talking about billions of dollars of commitments of orders that were taken off the table with suppliers in China, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, all through the developing world. These big multinationals, they cancel orders overnight. In some ways, they're actually by doing that, they're doing the opposite of what they're committing to do here. They're doing the opposite of what they're committing to do here. You with me here? And a big thing that I've noted in my top 10 trends post-COVID is a lot of multinationals now, especially in apparel and footwear, who canceled these orders, sending a lot of suppliers near bankruptcy in the developing world. They have to spend a lot more time to rekindle and replenish and reconnect these relationships. And it's going to take years to get back to what it was before in terms of the relationship, in terms of the supplier trusting these multinationals. So it's very sad. I'm teaching you, this is the best practice that they're doing, but then I read the other day about what they did do. So it's kind of, I'm sad to see that. I'm sad to hear that. Even one of the students in MIB last year, that they were a footwear company in Bangladesh, and Bata and Hush Puppies cancelled all their orders this year. And they were just left with inventory, and they didn't know what to do, So kind of opposite to what I'm saying, that this is the best practice. And then, 2020, this comes along, and then we have the behavior of multinationals doing the opposite of what they should be doing. And they should be helping the suppliers. They look, we want to cancel order, but look, how about we order a very minimum just to tie you over? Let's just wear some of your costs. They could have done that, but they didn't. So it's a sad thing to see what's happened this year in 2020. Okay, so let's just go to our Kahoot session of this area. Questions 5 to 9. Are you ready? I can't hear you. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Junbei Hala. Okay. Next, you ready? 3, 2. Are you all got it ready? Dan, you've just woken up. Great, good. Anyone else? Okay, good. All right, let's go. All right. And we've got hands at the top, followed by Zol, Alifia. Well done. Great effort, every one of you. All right, so let's go. Questions, remember, 5 to 9. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're only doing 5 more questions. Okay. What do S. Oliver, Puma, IKEA have in common when managing their suppliers? Okay, virtual design teams. I mentioned that a few times. Remember, they're sending the design teams to the factory. Why? Because they want to speed up the design and get to factory very fast, especially when there's 15 different styles of a fashion wear every year. That's a minimum for a lot of these apparel manufacturers. So the design to market is very, very critical time. Okay, let's go to the next one. Scoreboard, Han and Zal, very well done. Great effort, excellent. Let's next one. Which of the following is the element of Puma's three-pronged strategy? Okay, all of them. Remember, there was a lot there to digest, so it was tricky. But Puma's doing a marvelous job. They're trying to cover every base on this, and they're under a lot of pressure. Like, so is Nike, so is Adidas. These sportswear brands are under huge pressure to make everything perfect in their supply chain. Okay, let's go to the scoreboard. And Joey, big move on that one. You were very quick on answering that question, caused that move. Okay, next question, number 7. Which of the following relates to the environment element of Puma's strategy? The environment element. Okay, most of you would have got that one. Know the customer. Remember, these brands are in the customer's eyes every day, and the sports that are played, they're in the front of the world, like what happened with that soccer. Okay, knowing the consumer is very, very clear on the environment element. They put a lot of pressure on Puma to be environmentally conscious. Okay. Okay, Nicole, good effort on that one. Next one, 8 out of 15. Which of the following is a component of IKEA's three-legged strategy? Co-create solutions is a big one. Okay, all right. That one was a harder one because I didn't really emphasize that. But I think the big thing that IKEA is, what is special about IKEA and what is really interesting is that I think 80 or 90% of its suppliers for the whole world are located in China. Like it's crazy. It's even Apple doesn't have all of its factories located in China, you know. But IKEA is amazing for what it's doing, and they're very, very hands-on, very big on the development in helping suppliers come up with new solutions because they come up with new designs all the time. Okay, next question. Nicole, big move there. Big move from Emma and Halius. Okay, next question, 9 out of 15. Which of the following is part of the MMC best practice models? Harder one, but it's a challenge. Okay, most of you got that. Collaborative. Yeah, that's CCC, compliant, collaborative planning, collaborative in product development and production. And the big difference with collaborative planning, it's all about sharing information so the supplier feels like they're a partner. But when we're talking about collaboration in product development, it's more about the operational side. All right, collaborative planning is very big on the information side. Wow. Okay, it's where are we up to now? 9 out of 15. So this is our last one, I think. Let me just check. Wait a minute. Questions 5 to 9. So, Ginny, was that number 9 just finished, right?
Yes.
So the next one is number 10, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right. So we'll just go to the final part of what, and actually number 10, that brings us to our next, coming close to our next group presentation. But I'll give a short break before I do the presentation, but I will give a short introduction here before we do that. Okay, just to remind you again, and remember, this is the big theme, all right? Supplier development, what we just found out in the last half hour, multinationals they're looking at different ways, virtual design teams, collaboration. So collaborative planning is more the information sharing, then collaborative production is more the operations management. In two different ways, they're trying to, bring the supplier in like a partner in a long term, making sure the supplier can create new products or be more sustainable and find ways to reduce costs, but in a sustainable way. So we need performance measurement. We need teams on the ground to try and reach out to the suppliers, because we cannot just reach 500 suppliers. We need to have a system that tells us, okay, which 50 suppliers do we need to visit in the next 3 months? You with me here? And that's why we need some kind of performance measurement, all right? And so performance measurement is really, really big in terms of what large buyers are doing, performance measurement, monitoring, and cost control. And that's where we can go back. HTC gives us some early example of how they are measuring the performance of their suppliers. What we're going to do now is the group is going to present to us about what PQI is doing, but just want you to be aware of the following, that there is supplier selection, then there's supplier monitoring. So what do we mean by monitoring? Well, once the supplier joins our family, then there's co-creation and then there's co-production. Remember, co-creation is more working with them to design new things, and then the co-production is more the joint operations management and efficiency improvements. Okay, and so these are all ways in which you are helping the supplier development. Okay, supplier development is so critical for long-term management of suppliers by multinationals. And so if we're going to have these supplier monitoring practices, then we need to have some kind of formal system in place. And for the most part, like HTC and PQI are going to learn about, they have measurement criteria for supplier selection, but then they have measurement criteria for order allocation. An example is as follows: when I talk to firm A, B, C, D, E, and F, they tell me something differently about what they focus on when they select their suppliers. Firm D, E, and F, they focus on technology, whereas firm A focuses on quality, B focuses on cost, and C focuses on technology, and then quality and cost. And you can have a guess which one of these is HTC. Zulkifli? Which one?
I'm guessing it's from B.
D or E?
B, Bravo.
B for Bravo.
'Cause of
Interesting.
the cost.
Remember, this is when you're selecting the suppliers, not in managing the supplier. Remember, so see the down here, this is selection stage. So on the selection stage, firm E is HTC. So when they're selecting the suppliers, they focus on their technology capability. They're thinking about their costs, but also quality and delivery are very important. Okay. Which one do you think is Apple? Apple was here. We're going to have a look at that next week. Quick. Joey.
Donkey.
D for donkey, correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely Apple. Because I asked them, technology and quality, which one's more important? They said both. Don't you separate? No. Interesting. Okay. So that's selection. All right. Now let's go to the order decision process. And you'll notice, Zulkifli, you'll notice that HTC puts quality and cost as 1 and 2, whereas Apple is technology and quality as 1 and 2, and delivery. Very, very big on that. Now, what we're going to do now, let's have a break for, it's 5-minute break. And then after the break, we will have our next group to present on PQI, because one of these is PQI. So which one is that? Joanne, do you know which one?
C. From C is PQI.
How
From
did you?
C?
Well done. Wow, very good. Okay, so C is PQI. And notice, very similar to HTC, but different in terms of the selecting of their order allocation process. Cost is very, very important for PQI. With the selecting, PQI technology, but cost and quality are very important too. But when it comes to order allocation, they're focusing a lot on quality, then delivery and cost. So what we're going to do, we'll have a 5-minute break, and then our next group is going to present on PQI. So the theme, what we've got to now, the theme is, the holy grail is how can we best develop our suppliers, right? But what we're doing at this last part, and this group that round to present, HCC group did a little bit, this group drive this home a little bit further, is to show you what system that PQI uses to develop its suppliers. They use a performance measurement system. What does it look like? And that's what this group is going to present. Okay, so we'll see you in 5 minutes. And when we come back, and our group, is it group 8, is it, Joanne?
Yes, we are group 8.
Yeah, group 8. Be ready in 5 minutes. We come back, and then you're presenting on PQI.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, we're back again. Is everyone with us? Remember what we're doing tonight. We're celebrating the way or the challenges that multinationals have with managing their suppliers. We're celebrating the fact that the really good multinationals spend a lot of energy in putting systems in place to make sure that they're developing their suppliers. That third circle of that framework I showed you earlier. Supply development is so critical. They're all doing it in some way or another. So I just want to welcome Group 8, who will present on PQI. That's Power Quotient International and how they are managing development of their suppliers through the systems that they use. I'm mindful of the time tonight, and anything that we don't get through after that presentation, we can cover next week. So there's no problem, because we're continuing the same theme. That is, how do the multinationals manage their suppliers? So Group 8, would you like to let me know when you want to begin? Would you like to share the screen?
Yes, I will be sharing the screen.
Let me turn the volume up so I can hear you loud and clear. Are you doing Kahoot at the start, or is this?
Oh, we will be doing it in between the presentation. So
Okay.
I think, yeah, it will be great for everyone to log in first before we start.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay. I better log in, because I want to. Let me see. Let me just.
We'll start when there's like around 20 people in Kahoot.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
Yep. Can everyone join in so we can move on? We have 14. Is that all we have here? Ginny, is that how many we have? We have 15.
It was supposed to be 26.
20, yes. Come on, everyone. Wakey, wakey. We're nearly done. Your favorite person. Who's the favorite person? Okay. Come on, everyone. Is everyone in? Edgar, you're in. That's good. Joey, you're in. I need some competition here. Who else? Nada, are you in? Nada? Okay, you better start presenting, I think. And okay, it's good.
Good evening, everyone. We hope you guys are having an amazing day. I'm Abir. Me and my group members, Vanessa, Mira, Joanne, and Meng Lu, will be doing a short case presentation on PQI. PQI is a Taiwanese memory manufacturer, which stands for Power Coherent International Co. Limited. The presentation mostly focuses on their systems for dealing with suppliers. It includes selection, assessing, and managing mechanisms. Company background. The company was formed in 1997, initially as a memory module manufacturer. Eventually, the company expanded into flash memory cards, USB drives, solid-state disks, DRAM modules, disk-on-modules, portable hard drives, and portable multimedia players. The company has offices in US, Japan, Hong Kong, and China, has manufacturing plants in Taiwan and China, subsidiaries in US, Netherlands, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, and China. The company has multiple certifications, including OHSAS 1801, Occupational Health and Safety Assessment Series, ISO 14001, Environmental Management System, ISO 9001-2000 version certification, TOSHMS 2007, Taiwan Occupational Safety and Health Management System Certificate. Company timeline. The company was publicly listed in 2003, and by 2008 became one of the top 10 manufacturers for some of the products mentioned before. In 2010, the company joined Foxlink Group in July. Foxlink Group invested USD 28.91 million to acquire 15.94 stakes in the company. In 2013, Foxlink obtained PQI private company shares. Foxlink's rights increased to 42.56%. In 2018, PQI and other companies under Foxlink Group jointly established FIT Holdings Company Limited. Vanessa will pick it up from here.
Thank you, Abir. So now I'll be talking about how PQI company selects new suppliers. Well, like many large companies such as Apple, Samsung, and others, they have their own measurement system that helps them to evaluate suppliers' performance. And the other measurement system is to engage with suppliers and to know what areas the suppliers might need to improve on. PQI has 3 types of assessment designed for three deep groups of suppliers. The assessment form is based on 3 dimensions, which are capability, willingness, and relationship. First, PQI will assess suppliers' capability in terms of their financial status, supplying, technical, and quality control. Second, suppliers' willingness to share its future direction and information with PQI will also be appraised. And finally, the extent to which supplier is willing to invest in their relationship with PQI is also included. So overall, this is how PQI selects new suppliers. With that, I'll continue by talking about how PQI manages its suppliers. Next slide, please. PQI manage their supplier in terms of different components of the products and geographical span. The tier 1 suppliers are considered the most important as they are international and are mostly IC suppliers. They have high technology and can supply competitive products, which is crucial for PQI's product development. So they would have a weekly meeting with them to maintain the relationship and take advantage of suppliers' new technology. As opposed to tier 1 supplier, tier 2 are relatively insignificant as those suppliers provided standard products such as resistors or capacitors. So for tier 2 suppliers, PQI focuses more on the price. They would monitor the price monthly and evaluate them every 6 months. Lastly, tier 3 suppliers provided low-end products like cartons and also structural components like housings. The structural components usually involve die development, which would incur hefty fixed cost for die making. So experienced and skilled mold makers are critical for PQI because they can help them to bring new products to the market just in time. PQI usually meets tier 3 suppliers every 3 months to review their working relationship. And on top of that, PQI would renew contract with suppliers every 2 years. And if it involves PQI's design, IP clause will be included in the contract. So now we're gonna test everyone on Kahoot. Okay, the first question is, which classification below describe tier 2? You have 10 seconds to answer. Okay, time's up. Great. The second question, which dimension of PQI's assessment is based on? Time's up. Nico, great.
So, hi, I'm Lu. As Vanessa mentioned earlier, tier 3 suppliers provide low-end products. Moreover, PQI works more steadily with tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. So it values the tier 3 suppliers most frequently, once a month. The evaluation focuses on the quality and the service of the tier 3 suppliers. And based on these 2 factors, PQI adjusts the number of orders placed with the tier 3 suppliers. If the supplier continues to deliver defective products, PQI will choose to change suppliers and source from elsewhere. PQI also conducts an in-depth assessment of tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers every 6 months. The area assessed are their technical ability, their production capacity in relation to PQI's need, and the relationship between the 2 parties. From these 3 areas, 20 questions are extended to score. The scores are 0, 3, and 5. Suppliers are granted A, B, C, and D based on the sum of their scores. A supplier with a score of 100 to 90 is an A-grade supplier and will be given preference in sourcing, while a supplier with a score of 19 to 70 is a B-grade supplier as an average supplier. Supplier with a score of 70 to 60 is a C-grade supplier, and PQI will work with the supplier to identify areas for improvement. Below a score of 60 is a D-grade supplier, and PQI will not consider sourcing from them. Next, please. Let's take a look at a practical example in the evaluation form. Here, PQI provides 3 assignments of Tier 3 suppliers. First is Supply A. Supply A has a score of 75. From the form, it can be seen that Supply A has strong technical ability to provide PQI with high quality and competitively priced product. However, it is lacking in the delivery circle, production capacity, and supply capacity. The incentive to cooperate with PQI is low. So if PQI received an order with a long limited time, it can choose to source from Supply A. However, if PQI received an urgent order that needs to be delivered within a short period of time, this supplier may not be a good choice. Next, please. Supply B also scored 75, but Supply B has weaker production development capability, lower raw material price competitiveness, and lower grasp of the market. However, it has a relatively strong production capacity and is more responsive in terms of quality assurance. If PQI cooperates with Supply B, it can consider providing some technical support. Next, please. Supply C scored 69 and shares the same weaknesses as B in terms of product development capability. Supply C scored 0 on item 14 and 15, indicating that the supplier's knowledge of the market is unsatisfactory. However, Supply C has strong production capabilities. Contrary to Supply A, if PQI received a rush order, it may consider cooperate with Supply C. All right, we are gonna have a Kahoot question. The question 3 is, which of the 3 suppliers has the strongest technical capabilities? The answer is Supply A. So I'm going to pass next part to Mara.
Hello, so now I'm going to discuss about the cost management system of PQI. So after classifying and assessing their suppliers, PQI still need to achieve competitive price. And they do this through 2 approaches, cost management and expertise. And the video on the left is actually currently showing how the PQI employee break down the costs throughout their product design needs. So the first approach that I mentioned is the cost management. So what they do is they would ask 2 or 3 of their suppliers in order to compare prices. And then they would also ask them to break down the cost as detailed as possible, even until their transportation cost of the order. And also they would try to analyze the supplier's profit margin in order to bargain even more the price to be lower. And then the next part is better prices for larger quantities. So they would also try to asking for lower prices when they order higher quantity. And overall, the cost, they would only take the offer that is the most cost strategic in the long term. And the second approach is through expertise. So they hire purchasing manager who have years of experiences in research and development. So these employees would know how to approach costs through the product design point of view. This is beneficial for them to bring down the cost even more by changing the design or material use for the end product. Let's go back to Kahoot and do another quiz. Our fourth question is, what approach does PQI take to get competitive price from suppliers? Well done, guys.
Hi, I'm Joanne, and now I will present last part of our presentation today. The article states that PQI is wondering if they should share their assessment results openly to the suppliers or not. Sharing this information may have both advantages and disadvantages. As for the advantages, sharing of results, if the sharing of the results are done correctly, it can improve suppliers' performance as they will react to perform better if their scores drop, and suppliers can also openly communicate the areas to improve with PQI. And it can also help to build closer relationship between them. And since it shows that PQI takes them seriously and concerned about other areas as well, not just price. On the other hand, sharing assessment information involves additional cost, time, and human resources, and suppliers could actually use this information to benefit themselves. They may use it to manipulate the buyers to their advantages and also use this information to begin new relationship with new suppliers. Therefore, PQI should use this information wisely to shape the relationship between the existing and new suppliers and also to improve their overall performance. This is the summary table of our presentation today. As our group members have informed, PQI have classified their suppliers into 3 tiers, and they have their own supplier management process on selecting and managing their suppliers. As for the cost management, they compare the costs with breakdown of each component from 2 to 3 suppliers, and they also have an experienced personnel who is important during the negotiation and decision-making process. Now I will go back to Kahoot for our last question. The last question is, what are the major takeaways from our presentation today? And you guys have 10 seconds to answer. Yeah, all the answers were correct, and that's all. And okay, that's all from us, and thank you. Okay, thank you.
Well done. Okay, great effort, group. Nafis is celebrating, huh? Okay, I love that. Okay, good on you, Nafis. Thank you. Okay, well done, everyone. That's great. So as you can see, PQI is certainly got a similar system to HTC. Are there any questions? Let's just ask questions with the class. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? No questions? Okay, I've got some Kahoot questions that actually follow up on what PQI is doing and HTC, so we can get into that, and then we can wrap up what we're doing tonight. So I think that's great effort for the both groups tonight. Well done. I'm just going to share my screen, so then that's different from your screen. Okay, here we go. We want to let me share very quickly. Okay, so we know that the biggest challenge is, and I think the groups didn't make this clear, is that you've got different groups in these companies, HTC and PQI, say research and development, purchasing, quality control. they're in these procurement teams, so there's a potential problem to get them all on the same page. So that's something that we want to be mindful of. And because each of these teams have different preferences, like the R&D team at PQI want suppliers that have the capability. The purchasing team are looking for the supplier to be more willing to do things that the purchasing want to be done. So it's more willingness to cooperate. So it's more cooperation. Whereas quality control, they're focusing more on documentation. And so you get to see when you start to look at these performance measures that these multinationals are using on the supply chain, notice that, you've got 20, 20, and 20, there's 60, and you're thinking, wow, this is information overload. No, what you can see are their themes that separate one type of set of performance measures from another, depending on who is in charge of that the dimension of the procurement team: quality control, purchasing, research and development. And there's one story of one company that I know in Shanghai, US company, their purchasing procurement team in Shanghai, they had research and development, they had quality, they had purchasing, but they never talked to each other because they had different ideas about how to manage suppliers. And every year they had to get consultants in, not to do the negotiation with the suppliers, but the consultants got these three different teams in the same organization that weren't talking to each other, to get them to talk to each other, to be on the same page, so then they can be more effective in negotiating with the suppliers. Can you imagine that? A multinational having to get consultants in to just get alignment with different areas of the procurement department. So very, very interesting. So let's just go quickly to the Kahoot. So I got some Kahoot questions that are focusing on this, and it may be easy for you to do. So let's just go to the scoreboard. We're going to the next question. Are you ready? We're finishing up here, the quiz. Number 10, what is the main dimension of focus of high-end buyers in selecting suppliers? This one should be an easy one. This is the selection. This is the selection decision, not the ordering decision. A lot of Kahoot questions tonight for both presenting groups. Definitely technology. I know quality, but technologies is something that enables a supplier to be sustainable in the long term, and very, very big. Okay, next question, scoreboard. Emma's got a fiery move going on there and hands on top, followed by Joey. Okay, performance measurement. Which of the following is not a supplier attribute sought by research and development teams? Not a supplier attribute. Remember, we're getting into the actual detail of performance measurement systems that are used, and testing standard. It's not sought by R&D. R&D are looking for capability of the supplier. Okay, just a similar question here. And Zoel made a good move there. Well done. All right, similar question. What is the main supplier attribute required by purchasing? You should know this one. Extending the theme of performance measurement. Performance measurement is the one thing that multinationals use when they're managing their suppliers. Okay, willingness to cooperate. I did cover that. Willingness to cooperate. Purchasing, looking for that. Okay, and next one. Okay, Joanne, great move there. Joanne was in that last presentation. We'd expect that. Yes. Okay, what is the main supply attribute required by quality and control? Quality and control, what's the big thing you're looking for? Okay, we got all the answers, 19 answers. Yes. Most of you should have got this one, documentation, very, very big. All right, quality control. It's not about perfect quality. It's about documentation of systems and evidence of consistency in whatever you do. Ah, wow. Okay, so what else are we learning here on this scoreboard? Okay, so we're at number 13, and this is more on the cost side. All right, which of the following is not a cost management strategy? And you know, one of these is from PQI. Another one I mentioned earlier, when you have multi-sourcing, you can do benchmarking. And then which of the following is not a cost management strategy? Second last question. Okay, a lot of you got that right. So well done on that. Excellent. Market penetration is not a cost management strategy. And the final one, and we're talking about cost management, one-way suppliers can hide cost information from you. You should know this. I covered this before. All of you should get this correct. All of you should get this correct. How can you hide it? What's the best way to hide it? Remember, we're after the best answer here. This is an accounting question in some ways. Dan, you should get this one right. Okay, yes, hide it in the tooling costs. The tooling costs is the way. Remember, material costs, you can go online and get information about material costs and labor costs. But it's very hard to.
All of the above, though.
No? Yeah, but if I was a supplier, I would hide it in tooling costs.
No, so he means that you put the answer
on
Kahoot
is all of the above.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, my mistake. All right.
I lost my streak.
Yeah, even I lost that.
All right, relax. I don't know why I put all of the above. It's, yeah, I agree with the 13 that put tooling costs. Does it matter? Does what? Who lost their streak? Zoel and Emma. I apologize for that last one. All right. Dan, you're right. Okay, and okay, Joanne. Doing so well until I got that wrong. Apologies for that. Okay, let's finish up with just some administration here, because we are going to, and well done, great effort. A lot of questions on Kahoot tonight, especially the two groups design the Kahoot. It does take time to design the Kahoot to make it worthwhile. I'm not going to go on to new PowerPoints, but here's what I want you to take back tonight and think about in the next week, because we're going to spend more time on it next week. Okay, this is the biggest challenge. Let me just turn off the Kahoot. Sorry about that last one. I'll have to check the real winner here. Wait a minute, what's that? Okay. go back and find out who had the winning streak. Dan, you may have come out on top on that one. Okay, supplier development, that's the big missing thing. And so what you found tonight with the HDC presentation, with the PQI presentation, they are using more formal teams of performance measurement to help connect with their suppliers. Notice that PQI and HDC, the examples you saw tonight, they are more engineering-based companies because they are making consumer electronics products. So it's very engineering-driven. The examples I gave from the KPMG report were more apparel and footwear, were more furniture like IKEA. And so notice they were doing, it's not necessarily they had formal teams, but they were doing much more collaboration to share information. They were using loyalty programs to get suppliers to feel as though that if they move to the next level, they will get to share more information from their customer about the future strategy. If they will get to gold level, they'll get to partnership status where they can be involved more in product design. And that was likely to happen when you're working with IKEA, but less likely to happen if you are a generic component supplier for Apple or HTC, because that defines you as a supplier in the electronics industry. But when you're in fashion, footwear, design, when you're in furniture, sorry. When you're in fashion, footwear, design, and furniture, it's possible that you can reinvent yourself and then become part of a partnership with H&M, with IKEA, with Puma, with Giorgio Armani, S. Oliver, like I showed you. So different industries, there are different horses for courses in ways in which major customers work on supplier development. And that's the big thing that is different from what you learned in the first 7 weeks of this unit. And the first 7 weeks was more how do small buyers get to work successfully with suppliers. Big buyers, they have the power. And what I want you to take home tonight is just because I have the power doesn't mean that I can have a successful supply chain management. I need to use my power strategically by using special teams like virtual design teams, the way that my teams do work with suppliers to help in training, like what Puma does, the way in which I have performance measurement systems in place that enable to filter out the good suppliers from the bad suppliers. So then I can actually work closely with the bad suppliers in case some of them we can bring them back to be a sustainable partner in the future. So this was the big theme I wanted you to take away tonight. And there was a lot to take in. There was a lot to take on board for the first time in week 9. So we're going to continue the theme next week, this same theme, and have a look at the example of Apple. How does Apple do all of this, knowing that it's one of the more powerful multinationals in the world, if not the most powerful? And you would expect that, well, it manages its supply chain perfectly. Well, next week, you're going to find good sides and bad sides of how they are managing their suppliers. So that's for next week. What I want to take you home with tonight is just a few administration issues. Excuse me. And that's with the quiz, there were just 2 adjustments I had to make. Number 1, with question 29, everyone gets that correct because all of the options in 29 were correct. There was no option that was incorrect. Okay. Number 2, question 18, the computerized correct answer was not correct. So I had to go and recorrect question 18. And that was a question about, I've got that here. By the way, there was nine people that got answers that were correct on that. But that was the answer about the motivations of manufacturing plants shift away from China, and the correct answer should have been shorter product life cycles, not no need for speed for the market. And the actual PowerPoint side is very, very clear. Shorter product life cycles is a major heading on the PowerPoint slide that talks about that. So that was a big thing. I did mention there was question 6 that only 12 got right, and that was correct. So I had to do some just rechecking. Question 22, 14 got that right. So I double checked that. And question 23, 17 got that right. So I double checked that. And question 25, 12 got that right. And that was a question about blockchain. And only 11 got that right for question 26. So I double checked that as well. What I want to suggest, if you still have queries about that, please send me an email and I can follow up on any particular questions that you may be worried about. And of course, with question 29, 4 would have got that right, but that's because every answer was a correct answer. So just a small adjustment there. That means if you can see your ID number here, your revised grade is as follow in green. Can you see that? Can everyone see that? Is that too small?
Yep.
Wait a minute. I just wanted to be transparent here and apologize for that. It's not the error in the question, it's the error in the computer given the right answer. But I told the computer what the right answer was, so it's my error. I take responsibility for that. Okay. There's the ID number. The original grade given by the system was here, and your adjusted grade is as follows here. So if you have any questions or you want to follow up with me on that, I'm happy to receive an email from you, and I'm happy to discuss further or give more information on that. Okay. So you can take a note of that or take a screenshot or however you want, just for your own personal note. Nada, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good, good, good. All right. Everyone else? Joanne?
Yes.
Okay, I've got nothing else to cover. Only ask for your feedback tonight. If you can just write down the big thing that you had to take away tonight. Thanks to the 2 groups that presented tonight. And I understand the first group had to present early, so I appreciate you still being willing to go first. So that was fine. And thanks for the second group for delaying you, because I want to cover a few frameworks in between. So I think we extracted the main ideas that we want to cover tonight. And then next week, it's not necessarily new ideas, but we're going to look at a new case application of those old ideas. So let's just go to the, your feedback is very, very important. I think I jumped around a bit tonight. I don't think I was perfect in my presenting tonight, but hopefully we can go over similar issues next week. So then it will help to establish what we need to take away and really start to understand the big difference between small buyers and big buyers when it comes to multi-sourcing management. And then the student feedback, I'm just asking you to fill in this feedback sheet here. If you don't have to fill in every column, but if you can do 1 or 2, maybe a big question you have on your mind or the big idea that you have or something that what helped you the best tonight. Your feedback is very important always, and it's important that I bring a lot of energy to the class tonight and next week too. And while you're doing that, I just want to remind you that a lot of the global supply chain courses, if you can actually, there's plenty of them online, you can sign up and things like that. Most of them will give you the perspective of the multinational and how they manage the supply chain. There's none that I know that cover the perspective of the small buyer. And I think that's a special thing that I want to emphasize with you, because now you suddenly look at what the big buyers are doing, you start to see the contrast. And by seeing that contrast, you will actually find new ideas of learning, a new angle of seeing what a supply chain is like. Whereas if I just presented to you how HTC and Apple and PQI manage their supply chain, you may think, oh, that's how you do it. That's how everyone does it. But that's further from the truth. That's not how everyone does it. And hopefully after next week, you'll start to see the big contrast. And by seeing contrast, then you actually learn even more about how to manage suppliers. So that's the method in my madness in running this unit. So happy with your comments and questions. If you ask a lot of questions, then I can compile them and make a short video and answer those questions. And thanks again for staying with me tonight. And I think we are doing very, very well. My job is not to penalize any of you. My job is actually to encourage you to find out what really interests you, especially with the remaining assessment. And that is, number one, participation each week. We're still counting that. So keep participating and you can come out top on that participation grade. The other thing is on your group presentation, I'm meeting another group, I think this Thursday afternoon. Many of groups I've already met with you. If you want to meet with me to go over little things to make your presentation better, just send me an email and we organize a time to go over and how we can make your presentation better and your group report better, okay? I like some of the comments you're making, if any of you comments, and then we can finish up tonight, okay? And again, if you've got questions about any part of the assessment or the quiz, happy to receive that and resolve anything if you've got any confusion or anything like that that you want worked out. I know some of you are still putting information in, so I really appreciate that. Major reports. Okay. Now that everyone has finished presenting, I can make a comment on presentations overall. So how is what am I expecting for your video presentation compared to your class presentation? I think generally I'm looking for in your video presentation to be a lot more animated, and it's really, really critical in the video presentation that you're animated energy. So in other words, like this is a project that you've spent time on. This is a project that you have chosen and I haven't forced on you. So therefore I would expect that you're excited about it and curious and you got lots of energy. Okay, so that's probably number one thing for your video production. And number two is the flow between the presenters. So therefore, in order to get flow, you may have to do some rehearsal as a group. Your flow is very, very important. So look, there are two big things I would encourage all of you to pay attention to, especially for your video production of your presentation. Do you have to use the latest material for your video production? No, you can just use your smartphone. I'm not after the perfect production. I'm after energy, enthusiasm, and preparation. Okay, preparation in terms of rehearsal to make sure that whatever you are presenting flows from start to finish. I hope that helps. Okay, I'm happy to, any final questions for tonight? Ashley, any question? Jason? Yuchang? Nafis?
I just want to ask.
Please go ahead.
Dr. Neil?
Yes.
I would like to ask, does bigger buyer actually, because does bigger buyer actually care about the protection of their IPs, especially when they're actually partnering very closely with some suppliers? Are we going to talk about that?
Oh, yes, we're going to talk about that next week. But just to answer your question now, yes, they do. But it's easy for big buyers to protect their IP. Oh, by the way, for the most part, and we're talking about IP in terms of the design protection, okay? For the most part, I guess there's two challenges of IP protection. If generally, for the most part, you're looking for IP protection that gives you the first mover advantage in any market. So therefore, you want to have trade name protection, you want to have IP protection. And you just need to, if in any market, in any competition, copycats are going to come along within 12 months, if not sooner. So when we talk about IP protection, for the most part, we're looking at trying to get protection for the first 12 months to market. And then in the end, you know, if you are a genuine buyer or a manufacturer of a brand, you would have gone to product Mark II or product Mark III within 12 months anyway. You with me? And so the whole purpose of IP protection is to get that first 12 months jump. Okay. All right. So that's from the small buyer point of view, that's probably what all you need to do. With the large buyer, it gets a little bit more complicated because in some ways the products, there's more intricate designs, but it's easier for you to protect them. Why? Because you have a legal team that can actually get contracts written and protected in all the markets around the world that you are selling to. And for the, you know, if we talk about HTC or PQI or Apple, and we'll talk about more of this next week, is like just about every component, major component in a cell phone has some kind of IP protection. There's some kind of license attached to just about every major component in a smartphone. And so Sony Ericsson hold a lot of licenses of components that go in the smartphone. So when Xiaomi makes a smartphone, they have to pay a license fee to Sony Ericsson. Okay, Apple is using has to pay license fees. HTC has to pay license fees. Samsung is using designs that Apple is disputing, and so then Apple takes Samsung to court then Samsung say, okay, we take you to court over something else. And let's just let the lawyers fight with each other over many, many years. So Apple is always in court. Samsung is always in court fighting over who owns the designs and the licenses for various components that go in these smartphones. So, you know, the big multinationals, just because they're big, it doesn't mean they don't go to court. They're actually in court more often. They're always defending their turf more often. But the small buyer, what can they do? All they can hope for is that they just have 12 months advantage on their competition. And then they move on to a new design and hopefully just stay ahead. I hope that answers your question quickly at this stage. What do you think?
I think so, sir.
Did I answer your question directly, or is that, did I get off the track?
No, yeah, because I was like only wondering like why we didn't touch anything about like protection in this week topic. So that's why I was thinking
okay.
like
Yeah,
is it
sure.
because
We'll cover.
it's done or
Yeah, I know what you mean. You know, HTC and PQI, they're actually borrowing a lot of technology from other companies that already own the IP. So therefore, HTC, PQI, Xiaomi, they're paying license fees for a lot of the componentry that they use. PQI, for their hard disk drives, they are sourcing from LG, Toshiba, another large company, they're global suppliers. They have to pay license fees because they're actually using their technology inside their hard disk drives. So it's IP, there's IP protection, but there's a licensing. The licensing allows you to use someone else's design, but you just pay a fee to that person. So the big manufacturers, they do this all the time. Because no one, you cannot, no good redesigning a smartphone. You actually use same components as someone else. You may just have one little thing that's different. But then you pay license fees for all the componentry that you're using. Edgar, so it really depends on which industry you're in, you know. Nike, they got new technology for their running shoes, right? So they have a patent on that. They have, and so they will go and sue anyone that copies that. Okay, Mizuno, they have their wave technology in their running shoes. So they'll go and they'll sue anyone that copies that. So the big players, they can sue globally. And what the big players do is they actually sue in the market that the copies end up in. They don't have to sue the supplier themselves. They sue the end market because they have more power to do that. For the small buyer, it's too late when it gets into the market. So I think that's the big difference. They have the power to sue in the market where copies show up. So that's a very good question, Edgar. We'll spend a little bit more on that next week, especially when looking at Apple and how they do things too. Very good question. Any other questions? Okay, let's we'll close it out for tonight. It's 11:15. Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate your feedback, and just stay safe, stay healthy. I'm always happy to receive your emails or even your Google Hangouts. And any group wants to contact me to pick my brains on anything, I'm here to be contacted. Okay, I'm here every day, so happy to help. Okay, have a lovely week, and stay safe and healthy. I know there's a further MCO going on in Monash and Malaysia. I'm still in Hong Kong. I haven't been able to go back yet, which is fine. it doesn't mean I can't help you in anything you need help on. Okay, happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to help. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Prof. Have a good evening.
Great effort, guys.